Is the prequel trilogy good? I was going to start this video much differently than I am about to. I intended to have a supercut of people crapping all over the prequels and the Phantom Menace in particular. Lo and behold, I couldn't find much of anything with that theme. The couple reviews I did find, one of which being the classic Red Letter Media review, which seems more like satire than an actual review at this point, they all seem to miss the point of the prequels to me. The prequels have a much different story, tone, and themes than the original trilogy, but every review kind of reviews the prequels with this lens of the original trilogy, and they're vastly different in all of the things I mentioned. So I don't know why they continue to do it, other than the fact that Star Wars is the name. So with that in mind, I'm going to attempt to do the same thing to the prequel trilogy, starting today with the Phantom Menace, the same thing we did to the original trilogy, which is dissect a series of movies about space wizards and Star Wars for kids with way too much criticism. Although it was very difficult to do, we did find a few things that were less than perfect in the flawless original trilogy. And in the same way, I bet we find a thing or two that are actually good about the trash heap that is the prequel trilogy and today, the Phantom Menace. It's good to see 16 years of time to think have not changed George Lucas's mind on the opening crawl strategy. When it's finally over, we get a look at a blockade of ships and a messenger ship coming to negotiate. The negotiators being hooded figures. And the blockade aliens are still using that classic Star Wars practical effect approach for them, and they look really good here. The CGI of the unique circular ships and the planet backdrop look really good too, even by 2021 standards. Once on the ship, the hooded figures are revealed to be Jedi Knights, and we get a Obi-Wan name of one of the two, and another name drop of a Master Yoda. Early on in the film, I feel like big things are in store for us. The older of the two Jedi waxes philosophical about living in the moment, while Obi-Wan stresses about some vague evil in the distance. And it doesn't take us long to figure out what that threat is, as our favorite bad guy, the Emperor, makes an appearance not too far off. He picks up right where we left off, ordering the Trade Federation ambassadors to kill the Jedi and invade the planet. Crap hits the fan, and our two Jedi Knight heroes ignite their lightsabers together for the first time on screen, and it is awesome. One green, one blue, and the following scene where they slice and dice their way through a bunch of battle droids to get to the Trade ambassadors is super fun. Then we see what I think is, to this day, the coolest use of a lightsaber in Star Wars, as Qui-Gon plunges his ignited lightsaber into blast doors to start melting them away. That is just so cool and an inventive thing that I don't think anyone has done with a lightsaber since, and that's a depressing thought. A common theme that we will come back to in this movie is incredible sound design, and it starts here with the droidicas slash destroyer droids slash whatever else you want to call them. But their sound of gunfire and their shields are incredible, and that just permeates every bit of this movie, and it will be something that we call back to a lot. The Jedi make a quick escape using a cool new force power with a burst of speed that will come in handy numerous times in the future. They decide to escape with their lives instead and stow aboard some ships to make their way down to the planet. They go out of their way to make a note that it is a very odd play for the Trade Federation to start to invade the planet at this point. We also get the start of the much maligned political themes of this movie that people like to criticize. It seems pretty straightforward to me. Trade Federation does not like being taxed. It says so in the opening crawl. So they create a blockade to create leverage in the alleviation of their taxation.
Negotiation. We've lost all communications.
Darth Sidious orders them to invade, and that's where they screw up. If it wasn't for them making a deal with Darth Sidious, things probably would have been much better. Sidious had no interest in actually helping the Trade Federation. He was just manipulating them. And the rest of the movie is really just dealing with the aftermath of those consequences. But here we also get to see our first glimpse of Queen Amidala, and it really just kind of sets the tone for her as a character, being a more naive, young, passive, not wanting to go to war with this basically superpower in the Trade Federation, which is the right move, I would think. But it sets the framework for her character moving forward, and it's important to note how timid and reserved she is in these opening scenes. With that lack of military presence, the rescue falls on the heads of our two Jedi heroes. As we rejoin them, walking through a forest, evading the battle droids, we unfortunately meet the first, what I think is the down note of this movie, in Jar Jar Binks. He is just supremely annoying, and I don't know how anyone thought that this was a good idea, other than to try to appeal to kids, but I don't remember liking him. I thought he was annoying then, which, I mean, is the point of his character. So maybe that's good, but no, it's not good. It's not good. Jar Jar Binks is annoying and stupid, and the one thing I can say about it is impressive, the voice acting in a completely written dialect of English for this character. The voice actor, Ahmad Best, while the character himself is bad, the voice acting for the character that was written is pretty incredible. I've got to admit that. That's the only good thing I'll say about him, and we will move on with our lives. I love little things in movies, and this is certainly one of them. The shakedown that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan give Jar Jar is so cool, and it just kind of shows you a little bit of the rapport the two of them have developed with each other, where they can feed off of each other here. And that comes into play again later in a much more dire situation. After their intimidation check passes, Jar Jar decides to take them to the underwater Gungan city, which is another awesome scene, and will be another recurring theme for the movie, which is great set pieces. A little convenient that they happen to have some rebreather masks tucked away in their Jedi robes, but that's a pretty small footnote in conveniences of Star Wars, so we'll move on. Once inside the globe, we get what I think is the first big sin for this movie, and that is the CGI of the Gungans. We've already seen a little bit of Jar Jar, but he doesn't look too bad, but when you see the larger horse-like fish things and the people riding them, something just does not look right, and Boss Nass doesn't look great, and it's a real disappointment because, as I mentioned earlier, the Nemoidians, who are the Trade Federation ambassador people, they're using practical effects, and they look pretty great. So I'm not sure what the decision there was to use some CGI and some practical effects, but I wish they would have still leaned into the practical effects for the aliens, because it's just a real letdown seeing what could have been versus what actually is here. Once Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan get an audience with Boss Nass, we get some more touches of the political dealings of the movie, with the Gungans not being particularly fans of the Naboo surface dwellers. I don't know if we ever actually hear the name of the city in the movie, but it's called Theed, and I'm going to call it that from now on, just for my own sanity. But the people from Theed, they don't really get along with the Gungans so well. So the Jedi have to figure out a way through, and the best way to do that is with a good old hand-waving Jedi mind trick. Again, I love attention to detail and the small things where people are genuinely confused about Boss Nass just letting them go and giving them a car is really, really cool to me. Small things matter. However, Boss Nass is not done with them, as he decides to send them through the planet core, which is not a fun place. Here we get a 100% Star Wars waste of time sidetrack as Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon take a vehicle through some tunnels and water with some giant fish and then some even gianter fish. And Jar Jar just is so annoying in these scenes. It is unbelievable. I cannot fathom why they decided to make the character as loud and as screechy as he is. But boy, was it a bad decision. However, again, Ahmad Best's voice acting is pretty on point for it, and the dialect never wavers. So, still very impressive voice acting from him. Another criticism that we hear from this movie is the flat acting from everybody involved. And while it is certainly odd that the Jedi in the vehicle about to be mauled to death by giant fish monsters are totally calm, I think you're missing the point, like I said earlier, if you feel like the acting is just flat in this scene. The Jedi are supposed to be flat. That's what we see over the course of this movie, that their emotions are bad things, that you should stay at an even keel at all points to make the most level-headed decisions in the moment, and that fear and love and all that lead to the dark side. So while some of that doesn't apply to all characters, in particular the Jedi here, it definitely does. Snuck into the escape from the water that goes pretty uneventfully outside of a few scratches to their car is a scene with Sidious that sneaks in a little line about bogging down the courts with red tape. Not sure how people find these political lines hard to follow. Our heroes make it to the city no worse for wear, with a couple scratches on their ship from the giant fish. But they manage to sneak into the already occupied city and locate and rescue the Queen without much opposition either. Somehow the entire city does not hear these gunshots. Sure. Qui-Gon explains the situation to the Queen and says, they're going to kill you. We should probably get out of here. So they do. They head to the hangar, and we get to see two Jedi in peak Jedi form cut through some more battle droids, and they head to the Lambo of all Star Wars spaceships, the Nubian. This thing is the coolest ship, in my opinion, and if I was going to be flying one around the universe, that would be the one that I would want to be in. They decide to make a risky maneuver and just run the blockade, and their ship gets pretty wrecked because of it. Luckily, a little blue astromech droid saves the day and gets their shields back up and gets them out of danger. However, their hyperdrive is damaged, and they have to make a local stop at a nearby Hutt-controlled planet called Tatooine. Frick, that's the desert planet. We're going back to the desert. Can we just not go to a desert planet for one time? Just one time. Whether it's sand or snow, whatever, just no desert planets for one Star Wars movie. It'd be so cool. One Star Wars movie. Come on, next movie maybe? No desert movie? We'll see. We'll see what happens. Anyway, there are some objections about landing on a Hutt-controlled planet, but it's alpha male Qui-Gon's decision to make, and he says we're doing it. The blue astromech droid is confirmed to be our lovable R2-D2, and he gets all nice and cleaned up by Padme as a reward. We are also rewarded with some actually not terrible dialogue between Padme and Jar Jar, but Padme's is not great. If you told me that Natalie Portman would go on to be an award-winning actress from watching this movie, I would call you a liar, because her lines do fit that bill of flat and emotionless most of the time, and it doesn't make any sense. And it's not like Qui-Gon's lines where they're stern and direct and philosophical. They're just really badly written and delivered lines. when they get down to the planet, we get that trio of Qui-Gon, Jar Jar, and Padme that go onto the planet, and we meet another character who is not emotionless in an Anakin Skywalker. The child has lots of emotion, very poorly delivered and odd emotion, but emotion is emotion nonetheless. Child actors in general are a pretty hard thing to do, but I can't help but imagine a few more takes with some of these scenes wouldn't have been a bad idea. The scenes between Anakin and Padme in particular are really brutal, and the opening ones here are no exception, with Padme's emotionless one-liners mixed with Anakin's over-emotional lines back that sometimes just feel like a disjointed conversation, like they're not really even talking to each other. But then again, how many conversations with 10-year-olds do you have that feel fluid and not awkward? The yippee line steals a little bit of my soul every time he says it in this movie. Yippee! But it's a pretty accurate representation of what a kid would do. At least the scene does a good job of explaining that Anakin and his mother are slaves, and pod racing is a thing. Watto is another cool alien that I wish we would have got practical effects for, but the CGI doesn't look too bad. The voice acting makes up for it, though, as he sounds really cool and has his own dialect as well. So great job on the voice acting for these characters. The added touch of him speaking Huttese whenever only Anakin is in the room is cool, which makes me wish that other aliens would have had their own languages as well, but that's kind of nitpicky, I guess. Watto being resistant to the Jedi mind trick is a fun little callback to the first movie, where Obi-Wan says that it only works on weak-minded individuals.
Mind tricks don't work on me, only money.
That's cool, and it also makes it to where you can't just solve all your problems with Jedi mind tricks. So again, little things are important to plots, because that's certainly a question. Why don't they just Jedi mind trick everybody? So Qui-Gon is forced to realize that Republic credits are no good on a Hutt-controlled planet, and they have to find out another way. So they make their way through the markets, and Jar Jar gets himself into trouble, but I guess Anakin is doing that annoying kid thing where he just follows them around for a while, and happens to come save the day, and after he saves them, he continues to follow them around. Did I mention how that this portrayal of a 10-year-old is way too accurate? Anakin, being the selfless, innocent 10-year-old kid, offers a place for them to stay from shelter from a storm that's about to roll in. So they gladly go back with Anakin to his house. In his home, we see the situation is becoming a bit more dire back on Naboo as people are dying. It's definitely a trap, but
either way, we're running out of time.
So we decide to gamble on an extremely dangerous pod race with a 10-year-old as our pilot instead. I can't help but think that that would not be a Jedi Council approved method. In the conversation, we also get a bit of foreshadowing that I never really picked up on for some reason. It's not that it's particularly cleverly hidden, I never picked up on it about Qui-Gon's fate later on in the movie.
Perhaps I killed a Jedi and took it from him.
I don't think so. No one can kill a Jedi.
I wish that was so.
Liam Neeson is unquestionably the best actor in this movie, and this scene with him and Jake Lloyd, who is the kid who plays Anakin Skywalker, it's the best one with Anakin in the movie, I think. And I wish we would have had more of that quality from him. But you do get a good sense here of Anakin's sense of adventure and selflessness sitting at the dinner table discussing how he wants to help. So I think that this isn't just a good scene for Liam and Jake. I think it's one of the best scenes in this movie. In the middle of these Anakin home scenes, we get a shortcut to Sidious and Maul in the Coruscant skyline, and I continue to be impressed by the visuals of the locations in this movie, which are better than anything we've seen in the original trilogy. Maul himself is also very terrifying, with a red and black face and yellow eyes and that deep, gravelly voice. Makes me wish that he had more speaking lines and just existed more in these movies in general. We'll get to that later. The next day, back on Tatooine, Qui-Gon and Watto strike up a deal for the parts Qui-Gon needs for his ship, and he and Anakin start to develop a lot more of a relationship, mainly just based on the fact that he can sense he's strong with the Force, and also that he doesn't seem to have a dad. Interesting. Very interesting. We'll just ignore any more annoying Jar Jar stuff here. And on to one of the most hated parts about this movie. A single line about midichlorians. I've never really understood why people get so hung up on this, just because it takes some of the mysticism away from the Force, I guess, which I can relate to, but it doesn't really affect the story in any way, so it doesn't make the movie worse to me. I've never understood why people act like this scene murdered their dog and ran away with their wife or something. It's literally just a point to say how special Anakin is. As Maul makes his way to Tatooine, we get another awesome sounding spaceship. Maul is an absolutely terrifying villain, and I think in a lot of ways he's more iconic than Darth Vader. Vader's got this reputation for himself over several films as being this menacing, intimidating, imposing figure, but you really don't get that off first glance with him. Obviously, at this point, you are automatically connected with that as you see the giant man in black armor, but you didn't really get that off first glance. Before the race, Qui-Gon makes one more bold bet, a win for Anakin. Watto's not particularly fond of this, so he says, we'll let fate decide, and rolls a chance cube to decide whether it's going to be Anakin or Shmi, his mother. While Qui-Gon can't use the Jedi mind trick directly on Watto, he can use it to control the outcome of that dice. And that's probably not something that the Jedi Council would approve of. The gambling in general, but also the use of it to influence gambling decisions. So that's it's an interesting plot point for Qui-Gon as a character. He has been, is currently, and will continue to be a against the grain Jedi, and I don't think that that's an accident. Another criticism of this movie that I hear a lot is the pacing, and I would have to kind of agree with it. At this point, we've spent a lot of time since the escape from Naboo developing characters with not great dialogue, which is pretty par for the Star Wars course. But luckily, that's about to come to an end as we get into the pod race. The setup for the pod race is, again, a super Star Wars-y thing with aliens from all over the galaxy coming to watch this big race event called the Boonta Eve. And there's a lot of practical effect aliens mixed with CGI ones. So, again, wish they would have just went full in on the practical effects, but it doesn't look too bad for the most part because they're usually zoomed out quite a bit, but they're not great either. And I think in all of this, the capital offense of the CGI for me is seeing Jabba the Hutt CGI, because we saw him as a practical effect in Return of the Jedi, and it was probably the best practical effect in all of Star Wars. Jabba looked so cool in his palace scenes, and to have him replaced here with this smooth, oddly moving CGI thing was just so disappointing. Getting to the pod race itself, we continue the super Star Wars-y feel things, as while the race itself is pretty cool and sounds fantastic. Oh my gosh, the number of cool sounds that come from the pod race are through the roof. It was probably too long and could have been cut down quite a bit or almost entirely. But again, that's Star Wars, and with that being said, I really love this scene. I love the race. I love all of the visuals of it. I love the sounds of it. I love Tusken Raiders sniping at the pods as they drive through. Just all the little things of the race are super cool to me. And while it might have been good to be a little bit shorter, I think it serves a purpose, which many of these little side jaunts in Star Wars don't. We get to see Anakin's natural abilities as a pilot with little to no training, and his tech abilities, repairing his ship on the fly while piloting a pod that he built himself. So there's a real sense of backstory for Anakin in this race, as well as everything that's on the line in it. At the end of the race, Anakin wins by crashing his rival, and Qui-Gon shows no remorse for crippling Watto financially and by taking the only means of affordable labor he has. He returns to the ship with all the goods and has to go back to get Anakin, but there's a small exchange between him and Obi-Wan here that I think is a telling thing for Obi-Wan's character.
I'm going back. Some unfinished business. It won't be long.
Why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form?
Qui-Gon, on the other hand, shows a genuine concern for Anakin and leaving his mother Shmi behind on the planet. He would have absolutely brought Shmi with them back to Coruscant if he could have. And that is something else that the Jedi Council would have heavily frowned upon. After some goodbye scenes for Anakin, he and Qui-Gon make it back to the ship, but not before they are attacked by Darth Maul, and he is freaking sweet. After a weird bit of bad CGI flipping, we get into the first lightsaber on lightsaber combat we've seen, and it is pretty cool. The sand is getting kicked up, and you see blurs of the two figures, but the lightsabers are very clear through the sand, kind of reminiscent of the Empire fight with Vader and Luke with their sabers in the fog. And it's just really cool. But Darth Maul has Qui-Gon on his heels the whole time, and that is pretty apparent whenever he gets back onto the ship, barely escaping with his life, and crumples over, breathing and sweating quite hard. And it's another very cleverly placed bit of foreshadowing for the later duel. The cool action scene is rewarded by another scene between Padme and Anakin. This one is much better than the first one, but that's not saying a whole lot. It is also weirdly undertoned with a hint of romance, which makes it even weirder, because Anakin's like 10 and Padme looks like she's 16, 17, something like that. So it's just kind of weird, the ages there. I think this whole movie would have been better if they would have got a slightly older kid to play Anakin. If Anakin was more like 14 or 15, this scene and the romance tones wouldn't be so weird, and you probably could have got just a better actor in general for the role, and that probably would have went a long way to improving the quality of this movie. Once the gang gets off Tatooine, thank goodness, they make it back to Coruscant with no problems. The political scenes I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on because they aren't the most captivating things to talk about. I enjoy them, but I understand why most people would not. However, I'm not going to ignore them completely either, because what they do is they show the slow, gradual, manipulative rise in power that Darth Sidious made. And if you had any doubt who Darth Sidious actually was at this point, it becomes pretty apparent whenever Palpatine and Padme have their first encounter. It's pretty obvious that Palpatine is just feeding her the information that he needs for her to play exactly into his hand. And I don't know how people get confused about the political plot line, because he literally spells it out for her. We need a new Supreme Chancellor, so let's issue a vote of no confidence so we can have a new Supreme Chancellor that will be in our support. Seeing more of the visuals of Coruscant continue to impress, and seeing Samuel effing Jackson with a seat on the Jedi Council is awesome. Puppet Yoda looks great here. I am sad to say that he is later replaced by CGI, which was a head-scratching decision, because he looks great in the chair as a puppet. It's here that we discover the prophecy for the Chosen One, and Qui-Gon thinks it's Anakin, and there is a noticeable amount of disdain from the Jedi Council about this prophecy, particularly from Mace Windu. I will say, it is refreshing to watch a movie where someone takes information before their uppers and presents something to them, and they don't just say, "No, that is stupid, we will not support you in your efforts." They actually say, "Yeah, okay, the Sith is bad. Let's look into this, and also bring the kid before us, and we'll look into it." That's so cool. Why don't movies do that more? Have actual, like, supportive leadership instead of just crap ones. The closing scenes with the Jedi on Coruscant are strong ones, with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan really showing just how different of Jedi they are. Obi-Wan is a real man of the council, a straightforward Jedi Knight, while Qui-Gon acknowledges this by saying he still has much to learn in the Force. He does give him a vote of confidence to the council and says that he's ready for Jedi Knight training, after they tell them that Anakin won't be taken because he has too much fear and too much attachment, and he's too old. All of those fun Jedi things. But Qui-Gon says, "I'm going to train him myself then." But the council just hand-wave Qui-Gon's usual defiant nature and says now is not the time for this, because you need to go back to Naboo with the Queen, because she's going back and things are going to get real. So they put this with a pin in it, and they head off to Naboo to hopefully see what the Sith thing is all about. We also get the best meme format of the movie here with Palpatine.
Surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
As they depart Coruscant, Obi-Wan continues to press Qui-Gon on training the boy, as he calls him. An interesting note that he refuses to use his name still. Qui-Gon even acknowledges the fact that it might be dangerous training Anakin, but his fate is uncertain. So he tells Obi-Wan to get his butt on the ship, and has a closing line with Anakin, where he tells him that his focus determines his reality. And I think that line is an important one when examining Anakin's future, which we will do in the next couple movies. They managed to sneak by the blockade in their newly repaired Lambo of a spaceship and make an alliance with the Gungans. They formulate a battle plan to sneak in, take the capital back, and disable the battle droids by destroying their spaceships in orbit. The battle plan on the ground is essentially sacrifice the Gungans as a distraction, which the Gungans are okay with because they're proud warriors, I guess. For all my talk earlier about how naturally intimidating and terrifying Darth Maul is, this one cracks me up. Seeing Maul walk beside the 9-foot-tall Nemoidian viceroys is hilarious every time. They make him look like a child. A terrifying demon child, but still a child. Now we will take a brief interlude to admire the beautiful sound design of the Gungan battle. The battle itself is pretty lackluster, with a few cool scenes with the shield wall and Jar Jar taking out a tank on accident. The battle plan does work perfectly, though, which allows the stealth team to sneak into the hangar and get their ships and start making their way into the palace. Don't at me, bro, but the Naboo space fighters are the coolest space fighter ships in Star Wars, X-Wings included. I know, everyone hates me now. The rest of the party then sneak off to the palace to look for the viceroys before they are rudely interrupted by the spiky-headed boy himself, at which Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan decide to take on and begin what is absolutely the best part of the movie in the Duel of Fates. The Duel of Fate for Anakin in particular, who just took off in a spaceship towards a space battle. No great babysitter there, Qui-Gon. The space battle is a pretty great one, in my opinion. You still have the classic cockpit Star Wars shots and more absolutely incredible sound design. Anakin's acting, not so great.
This is tense!
The space battle is a little shorter than I would like it to be, with the Gungan battle being quite a bit longer than I wanted it to be. Some weird pacing of these two battles. However, they do mix it up quite a bit, so the pacing doesn't really stagger. I just wish that there was more space, less CGI land battle. The CGI in the space battle looks much better than the one on the land, mainly just from the perspective of it being back more. So it's a little bit more forgivable in space as opposed to on the ground with the weird elephant creatures and horse fish things. They all just look a little bit off, which is more of a sign of the times. So if they would have done this movie today, this would all look really great. But unfortunately, they should have stuck to more practical effects, and they didn't. With Maul occupied, Padme and her team have some more great sounding hallway blaster shootouts, just like the old Star Wars, but they get captured quickly. I could make an entire video talking about just how great the Duel of Fates is, so I'll try to keep this short, but the set piece in the reactor room is so awesome. Everything looks incredible in that piece. The small things, like the synchronization between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, are great, where they tag team this guy. There's a part where Obi-Wan does a feint attack in just to throw off Maul, and Qui-Gon doesn't hesitate as he follows that up. Just their level of cooperation is so strong at this point, with Obi-Wan almost ready to become a Jedi Knight, and they just do a great job showing that without telling you it, which is perfect. The whole fight is fantastic, from double-bladed lightsaber ignition to Maul being sliced in half. Spoilers. The one downside is how that last part happens, though. And it's a big downside to me. The whole fight, again, is great, but the end has Obi-Wan hanging over the edge precariously as Maul taunts him by slashing at the ground in front of him. And Obi-Wan has a moment of epiphany and does a forced jump and pulls Qui-Gon's lightsaber to him, and Maul just sits there and watches as he does a flippy maneuver and lands and then delivers the slice in half blow, and Maul goes tumbling down the reactor pit. It was just a very anticlimactic finish to what was a great duel. You would hope that Obi-Wan would have beat him in some actual fight, not just a weird, almost impossible maneuver that doesn't make any sense. But it is what it is. They did Maul dirty here, and I'm sad that we don't get to see him in any more movies. There are a lot of pieces this final act, and I have to say they're woven together pretty perfectly. The Queen's double shows up at just the right time, coincidentally, to distract the viceroys. That allows Padme to get a secret stash of guns out of what I assumed was a pretty peaceful nation, just hanging out in her throne. So I thought that was a little odd, but I guess it makes sense. Don't want to be surprised by anything. Have a gun in your chair, you know? That's a perfectly normal thing to do. At the same time, Anakin crash lands inside the main control ship for the droids and starts blowing up everything on accident. He says some pretty annoying things that a dumb kid would say in the moment, I'm pretty sure. So, more accurate portrayal of a 10-year-old kid there. It's a little weird that the feds didn't have any redundancy built into that one control ship, but there are much worse oversights in Star Wars, so that's pretty par for the course. With the droids disabled, the small military force is able to retake the city and capture the viceroys. Obi-Wan is made a Jedi Knight, and true to his word to Qui-Gon's dying wish, says that he will take Anakin to be his Padawan learner. An important note that he used his name here. At Qui-Gon's funeral, the looming threat of the Sith is discussed, with Palpatine standing literally right beside them. The entire Republic, Senate, and Jedi Council attends the celebration on Naboo for some reason. Annie gets his Jedi duds, and Boss Nass gets one of those cool electro orbs you can buy at Hot Topic as a reward. And that is the first prequel movie. And I, for one, think that as a whole, it did Star Wars better than anything that the original trilogies did. The acting is not great, but if you've been expecting that, I'm not sure what Star Wars movies you were watching. Liam Neeson, Ian McDermott, and as much as I hate to admit it, Ahmad Best voicing Jar Jar Binks were actually pretty good in the movie. I don't really think I can say that for anybody else, Ewan McGregor included. It has really good production value, CG aside. The CGI was very much a product of its time, and other movies in the same era that use CGI are about the same, probably worse than this movie. So it definitely could have been better with less, but the CGI for its time isn't bad. The set pieces that are mostly CGI are really great visually, really imaginative, and the action sequences are some of the best that I remember. Just in my recollection, when I think good action sequences, I come back to this movie. The sound might have something to do with that too, but the greatest lightsaber duel in all Star Wars and possibly the best sword fight in cinema history exists in this movie, which is a big vote for this movie being great. And I think it's really good. I don't know if it's better than Empire Strikes Back, just because Empire is... The story of Empire is so good, and this is just the setting the stage for the prequels, and I think it does a great job of that. And whether you like the political themes and storylines in this movie or not, it does a fantastic job setting the world that is marred with political governance and red tape that make it prime for manipulation. And knowing that that's the world that we're going to live in for the next couple movies is a critical thing for the first movie in a series like this. I think it's really good. It's not quite Empire, but it is right behind it, I think. So very good movie, very good Star Wars movie. I don't know if I would say very good movie. It is an above average movie, very good Star Wars movie. And I'm really excited to get to the next one in the Clone Wars. I was really happy to review this, and if you want to see me do Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith afterward, I'm really looking forward to getting to those. So give me a follow, hit the like if you liked the video, dislike if you didn't. Tell me how dumb I am in the comments. I'm looking forward to that for sure. But for now, I'm gonna leave it with you, and until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.